each of us have a tendency to do one of three things really, really well. I tend to help people. So even without asking, I want to solve their problem. I naturally go to that. Then my wife, if you ask her, she is the most amazing listener. And if somebody doesn't ask my wife directly for help, she's going to listen. She's going to give that person that and demonstrate that really, really well. And then you're going to find this third person that's just really your emotional sponge that can take all of your negative and your positive, absorb it with you and experience life. And it came on this idea of asking something very simple to yourself and perhaps to the other person. Do you need helped? Do you need heard? Or do you need hugged? And that really breaks down the assumption that we each have taking into the conversation.
Welcome to Return on Empathy, a podcast brought to you by the Empathy Collective, a community where leaders come together to navigate change without losing their humanity. Whether you are a plant manager trying to humanize the factory floor, a small business owner wanting to build a strong culture that lasts, or a corporate executive striving to prevent burnout in your team, you belong in this community. Today's episode explores what it really means to lead with empathy in environments where precision, speed, and performance are non-negotiable. My guest, Dr. William Harvey, is a chemical manufacturing program manager, university professor, and U.S. Marine Corps veteran who brings together operational excellence and deeply human leadership. By day, he leads specialty chemical manufacturing sites focused on sustainable chemistry. By night, he teaches business students at the University of Cincinnati. And in between, he serves the broader manufacturing community through organizations like the Association for Manufacturing Excellence and the American Society for Quality. What stands out about William's leadership philosophy is his belief that empathy has the power to unlock potential in people. He sees firsthand how taking the time to understand people's pressures and perspectives turns compliance into commitment, and how resilience is built not by eliminating struggle, but by facing it together. And don't forget to stick around for the passing of the empathy torch at the end of the episode, where William will respond to our previous guest's empathy challenge and share his own empathy challenge for the next guest. We encourage you to take on these challenges as well and share your experience with us. This is Return on Empathy. Welcome to the show, William. It is really good to have you here. I know it's your busy season, so I'm very appreciative of you taking the time to be with me today and have this dialogue. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. Excited to be here today. No, my first connection with you goes through a mutual connection, Meg Brown. Really excited to follow her footsteps and connect with you and promote something I think is really important in all of life, not just workplaces.
I love that, and I really do think this conversation will transcend the manufacturing environment, the workplace environment, and I mean, it goes beyond the walls of workplaces. So that's why I always enjoy these conversations. And I also love starting off all of these episodes talking to my guests about their career journeys because I always find it so incredibly fascinating, yours included. So I know by day, you're a plant manager. By night, you're a professor. You're also a veteran. So you have such an interesting background. I'd love to hear more about how you came to where you are today. And then also, at what point did you realize, oh, leadership is really deeply human? Because that's why we're here today, right? To have this dialogue.
Absolutely. And I would share with you the part that I would say stands out for me, and I'll just call them seasons. So three major seasons. You mentioned my U.S. Marine Corps experience. That's foundational and will help answer that last part of the question. Get into a career in printing and packaging. Had a lot of fun. So I started to learn more about manufacturing excellence. And then for the last 8+ years, I've been in chemical manufacturing. In that time frame, I picked up in the third season the job as a professor, and there's been wonderful overlap and integration between the two, where I'm taking stuff to students and the stuff that I'm getting trained in to teach comes back to work in the best of ways. And the career has been a little bit of, I would say, two stories. And it seems to always be that I get some leadership role. I do well in that. And then I get some really fun tasks to do that's important to an organization. So I find myself bouncing between being the operations leader and then doing operational excellence in some capacity. And as of January 1st, I'm in that second part of the work right now. So it's an exciting time for me because it's new. I know it'll be meaningful to my organization and a lot of the folks that are impacted by the work that we're going to do together. And to your point about deeply human, this is going to go back to something I think people may be surprised if they don't understand the military. through personal experience. So they just hear about all these drill instructors yelling, screaming, and then there's some point in the process where you realize they're actually really kind to me because they're teaching me through clarity. They are being empathetic in ways that you don't quite understand in the moment when you're getting yelled at, but you say, you know what, these guys really care about us. And there's a shift that happens in the Marine Corps boot camp. It's 13 weeks. And I call it somewhere in that 6 to 8 week range where you go from like, I hate having these guys around yelling at me to now I'm listening because I understand what they're trying to teach me. I mean, the really meaningful part for me was when you took that into the career as a military veteran, you would get to this point of saying, okay, well, if I'm not clear to folks, if I'm not showing kindness, if I'm not empathetic, we're going to have a higher risk of injury or death. So for me, it became deeply human thanks to those leaders. And I think if you were to go ask many folks, an overwhelming majority would say they absolutely love those people after a certain point of the training.
You feel like the people who were going through the training with you kind of had that aha moment right around the same time? Were you kind of feeling the vibe from the collective, or was this very much your individual journey?
I think it's a shared. That's why I give that range of 6 to 8 weeks. And to me, at that point, you're beyond the basics of just like how do you function in military life, getting into the, what are these people really trying to teach me? Because initially it feels like you're being disciplined and yelled at, but then you're like, no, they're actually correcting me in a very extreme way. But that correction, I think, for a lot of people becomes appreciated once you understand that it's coming from a place of care, not from a place of judgment. You're like, now I'm starting to see it. So I would imagine for at least Marines, that's my only experience is they're probably in that range somewhere around that same time where they say about halfway through, it's like I started to see a different side of it, understanding why they were doing what they were doing from a training perspective.
I think you bring up a really good point about the why of the leader and coming from a place of caring. And I know you've talked to me about developing a culture of compliance versus commitment. And I think those two
Hmm.
things stem from the why of the leader, right? Is it
Yes.
coming from a I want to control the situation, or I care about you as a person? And there's such a fine line because you're saying, you're basically getting yelled at for an extended period of time. And that yelling could come from a very different place, but there must be this little nuance where you were able to feel their why is coming from a place of caring. How did you know? Like what was it about their behavior when you dug deep, when you went beyond the yelling,
Hmm.
that you just knew they're coming from a place of caring?
So I would share for you that there's a few examples, and they're just things where they were very prescriptive in military training. But for example, when you were told to freeze, the idea was that you would just stop moving instantly. And if the drill instructor would sense somebody moving, he would just lay into that person. And in this story, I think it's true when you translate that to wartime environment where if you're told to freeze, you don't question the order. You just say, there's somebody trying to protect me. I don't know why yet. I mean, there's some of the more physical training where you're saying, I'm going to hold my rifle out at arm's length. And you're saying, what is this for? You're like, well, because sometimes you're going to be in an awkward position when you're told to freeze. And the difference is if I move, I'm not going to be physically or mentally prepared to hear that order and just survive the moment. So I think for me, there are these small things that are trained into any of the basically trained Marines, but become really foundational for, okay, this person's not teaching me this because they're being mean. They're teaching me this because if I don't do this, the risk is high to not me, but the others around me at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, and that's incredible. That's that just those tiny behaviors that you really picked up on. So how did you translate what you learned in the military to the workplace? That why of caring and the compliance versus commitment piece.
I would say it's a multi-year journey, and I would say it's still unresolved for me. So I'm going to go into this creative tension place where the two things that we were taught commonly were mission accomplishment and troop welfare. The mission accomplishment always came before troop welfare. And for me, it was one of those things I was like, I just don't like it because I still am very people centric. But as the years have come, more experience has been gained by me. It's like, well, if I don't take care of the mission, I really can't take care of the people. But it's still one of those things I just feel, I'd say a comfortable imbalance of like, this just doesn't feel right. So it's really just trying to balance those tensions of how do I make sure people are taken care of in the workplace today? And how do I honor what the customer needs from us? So there's that playful, I would say, and fun type of experience where you're collaborating with people like, well, I do need to take care of Rebecca, but I also need to make sure we are solving this problem together by the end of this period. And with that, it's been one of those things I would say has been translated really, really well. However, it's still that mental struggle for me as I'm trying to figure out like, well, what do you feel best about? You're like, oh, I don't really feel best about this, but this is the best thing I could come up with that honors both of those at the same time.
Yeah, I love the way you describe that kind of that playful, that kind of in between the where you have the tension between the 2, the creativity, the problem solving, and the need for speed too. I love what you told me about wanting to unlock potential in people. I'd love for you to elaborate on that a little bit further as you're going through this unresolved journey that you're on right now. What does it mean to unlock potential in people? Like, what does that look like in the day to day?
Yeah, so I think it starts with what's your basis for how you approach people? And my work experience, my life experience has taught me that in the absence of obstacles, people will focus on the quality of their work, demonstrating the pride they have in what they're doing. So there became this overarching goal, and it's a goal that can never be achieved. I'll share that, but it's the ideal pursuit, the North Star that at least I'm aiming for, which is when I think about talking with somebody, do they have pride in the work they're doing? And would they say, I'm happy to bring my family here and show them the place that I do work? And if I get something that's not a yes and a yes, then I go to that person and say, well, what would make you feel that way? And I'm not using those words exactly, but ultimately that's what I'm driving toward, because I do believe at the end of the day, no obstacles, people will continue to do really well in the work, and they'll improve it without me saying anything. They'll share ideas that management can listen to and respond to appropriately. And to me, there's a specific instance that I came up with a gentleman named Corey. And Corey and I had this really good relationship over the years. He's been one of those veterans you get to learn from about all types of processes, the products we make at my organization. And he moved into a new area. And over the course of so many years, you just got to the way that the thing was. And it wasn't good or bad, it just was that. And in talking to Corey, it was like, hey, I was walking through your area and I was curious, like, now you're here now, you've been here a little bit. What would you change to make it better for you? And initially it started off with some hesitancy. Then it was just like one bigger ask, one bigger ask, one bigger ask, one bigger ask. And ultimately we got to this point where I get to at least the end of the first round with Corey, and I say, what else do you need? He goes, I don't really have anything else I can do right now, but I'll come get you if I can find something. So I think through that iterative cycle of partnering with folks like Corey, we get to this point where I'm not telling him what he should do. I'm simply sharing, hey, how can I enable you to be more successful the way that you see the gaps? I mean, what I think is beautiful at this point is the relationship just strengthens to the point if my suggestion is shared, he knows it's coming from a place of care, not a place of judgment, and just saying, would this be easier for you? So I'm not introducing any of the complex tools and conversations that many folks in continuous improvement know, but rather just simply saying, what's getting in your way? How do I help remove those obstacles? And I think from a relationship perspective, that does two things. One, Corey and I have a much better relationship. And two, Corey, because he is one of those informal leaders, is sharing the same message that I'm coming to help, not coming to criticize, judge, complain, tell people needs to work. So for me, it gets just a little bit easier for me as I go into, call it area 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah, and I'd love to know, as you come from that place of caring and you're approaching your frontline employees in that manner, when you enter a crisis situation or a situation where you have to speed up or the pressure's on, how does that relationship that you've built with them, how does that impact the way you lead in those circumstances when you're under pressure? Does it help?
It does. And the reflection I'll share is back to me not being very good at basketball. So I'm 6'6", tall. So people naturally think I should be good at this sport. And I would just say, like, on my best day, I was average. You're like, all right, I can play defense, but you're like, if you want me to score, I'm not your guy. So I remember going from, team 1 to team 2 that I could make the team, but I would just go, you know what, I'm just not the best on this team. And I knew that. But when I went to the second team in high school, I realized very quickly the 5 starters had been playing together for a decade plus. So at this point, they've been playing since they were 5, 6 at that point, and they were already gelling in ways that I couldn't use words to describe. They just knew where the person was going to go. And I think about that with any team that has a chance to work together. You just know where the other's going to do, where the other was going, how they're going to respond to a certain situation through that trust and the consistency in the relationship. So I think in crisis situations, whether it's the basketball team I wasn't so great at, or it's dealing with folks in the workplace, it became one of those situations where it's like, well, I know where Rebecca's going to go, so I'm going to go here because we know what to do to balance each other and partner with one another without even saying a word. And to me, that's what you get in those crisis situations, because I would just say it's impossible to plan for, but if you train regularly, you can say, okay, I know how to respond to that situation. And it's only through that reflection later that you can go say, hey, did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? Why did you do A? Why did I do B? And then we can have that conversation. I would say just say continue iterating forward.
If you are loving this conversation with William Harvey, this is exactly the type of stuff we will be diving into in our brand new online community, the Empathy Collective, in July when we launch. If you want to become a founding member and shape the conversations in this community, go to our website, www.theempathycollective.com, and click on Join Our Community to sign up for the waitlist now. We are so excited to meet you. Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is it makes you more agile because you already have a pulse on how people are going to respond in times of high pressure or crisis. You're more resilient, you're more flexible. And I loved your basketball example because although I'm not 6'6", I'm tall as well, and I always was told that I should play basketball, and I was very mediocre at best. So I completely understand where you're coming from. So I'd love to dig into when you were working with Corey. You mentioned he was hesitant at first. How did you overcome that initial resistance or hesitance that he was feeling? Was it just simple persistence, or was there another secret ingredient that you that you had for that recipe?
So in the best of ways, my organization has a strong sense of control in terms of cost control. So we were almost to the point where we were trying to do with less, even though investing money would make the whole process easier for everyone. So we got into the point essentially where over his 20 plus year career, we just did with what we had, and we'd only really ask if we really, really, really needed it. And so I think that was the hesitancy. It wasn't so much the relationship between he and I, but more so like, well, we don't normally do this. Should I do this? Because I can keep working around these problems. And it's as simple as like, hey, would you like a toolbox that you can put your tools in rather than your desk drawer? Because right now they're just assembled in a not great way. Would you like to have some organization? So yeah, that'd be awesome. So buy a toolbox. And it's like, hey, that shelf's kind of falling apart over there. Would you like to change that to something that will work better for you? And then I'll never forget when he'd see the price. He's like, I don't know, William. I don't know if I should do this. And it was just that, I would say, reassurance from me to him that, hey, it's okay. We do need to do this. It helps you. It helps all of us when we talk about, inviting our customers in and seeing how we work. So inevitably, it's one of those things that's just a self-fulfilling prophecy where if we do that really well by taking care of Corey in this story and we take care of our customers, then we're in just a much better spot. So I can take care of, Corey plus, plus, plus throughout the organization that way.
Yeah, and that kind of speaks to how this work kind of reverberates beyond the workplace. You're mentioning plus, plus, plus. So you're helping your employees. Therefore, that translates to higher customer satisfaction. Customers are satisfied. That leads to, it's like the domino effect. And the other thing that I always like to mention too, as I hear this in almost every single interview I have with folks, is people come home to their families, and you mentioned it to yourself a few minutes ago. Are they willing to bring their families to the workplace? Are they proud of where they work? And so you're basically bringing home an environment to someone's family that's positive, that they're not coming home feeling stressed and micromanaged, and they're bringing that to the dinner table with their family. So in a way, your way of caring and approaching your work with care, that trickles out to societal impact. So I know we're getting a little
Yeah.
philosophical here, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and how you've seen that translate to maybe the family life that your employees experience at home, because you are starting with that why of caring. You're somehow expanding that out into societal impact.
You mentioned dinner, so I'm actually going to go there because that's actually how I describe training programs at work. And I would say for you and anybody listening, just think about your first week at your current job. You get home on Friday, it's dinner time, you're assembled around the table with the family, and somebody says, how was your week at your new job? If you're not showering praise about that first week, then I would say companies have something they can do better. So for me, it's really just saying, how do you set up each person for success? And if I just confine it to that week, it's like, what can everybody do if they put 3 days worth of effort in? So even if I need a fourth or fifth day for somebody, when they get asked that question on Friday, it's like, this company had it together. They taught me all the basics this week. I got certified through module 1 of my training. I'm able to go to module 2 next week. I'm really excited about it. When I did have questions, I knew how to reach out to with my supervisor or the trainer, and I just can't wait to go back. That's the answer in so many ways that I want to hear somebody say at that dinner table on Friday night. But then I think about how do you enable that forever and ever, not just that first week. And to me, it's just how are you setting people up for success? And that really is the job of management, in my opinion. So how do you create the environment for people to be successful? So I think their natural state is they want to be successful. And the things that get in the way are management policies, maybe conflicting priorities. So then it's just saying, how do we work through those to enable folks? And if we can do that, I think every Friday night conversation was work was at least good. Maybe I worked hard, but I know I'm working on something meaningful and I can't wait to go back the following week.
No, I love that, and I would almost add to that Friday night survey, the Sunday night reflections of, are we experiencing the Sunday scaries? Because I feel like, so many people I talk to, they get to
Mhm.
Sunday night and their blood pressure starts to rise, they're starting to panic, they're looking at their work emails, trying to catch up on what might be thrown their way during the week. And I remember when I interviewed Bob Chapman, the chairman of Barry Waymiller, he was talking about how the rate of heart attacks significantly increase on Monday mornings when people have to go back to work. So we're literally killing people at work, which is horrible. So I almost wonder if, yes, if at the end of the week, if we're interviewing people at the dinner table on Friday nights in their homes, like how are they feeling? But also on Sunday nights or even Monday mornings, what's the mental state, right? You've probably had jobs in the past where you've had the Sunday scaries. I'm sure we all have.
Yeah, it's been both. And to the point where I'd say I get to experience the good stuff. It was like, I can't wait to go back to work because I'm excited about what we're working on this week. I mean, I mentioned to you right before we started recording that it's really that part for me in Q1. Like, I've got my plan, I'm getting the work, put in the extra time, really focused effort. And to me, it's a really exciting time. I think it goes back to, the organization you work at. How does leadership treat you? They treat you like a human. They respect certain things. What are those policies that they put in place that are beneficial, whether it be taking care of a family member or taking care of a new child. And if those policies are in place, you got to say, is this really a human first type of workplace? And then I really judge it at that level first. And I'm fortunate where I work today at a couple of different places that you do have those policies in place. So when unfortunate events happen or really awesome things like childbirth happen, people can take care of their families. So I think it's part policy and it's just part how does your supervisor treat you? So on that second part, it's just really how do you enable supervisors to work through those inherent conflicts with, hundreds to thousands of people working together with a bunch of different ideas about how work could be done.
No, I love your reflection on that and how it's really about the how we get stuff done and how we collaborate, how we work together with our teams. And I also love the reference you made earlier about this kind of conflict about being in an organization that prizes speed and then setting aside time for reflection as a team. It's almost like they conflict with one another. But it's necessary if you really want to build resilience as a team. So I'd love to know, in your work environment, how do you as a leader create space for reflection for yourself individually, your own self-care, but then also for your teams without the fear of losing momentum or fearing that slowing down will prevent you from hitting your milestones or your deadlines? How do you encourage that time?
So for me, you have to plan the time, and it's going to come through some very simple means, at least the way that I've been practicing it. Years ago, I was taught in our daily meetings to ask two questions: what went well and what needs improvement. And those two questions are powerful. What I learned though was that didn't build the trust I was really after. Because when you ask what, people start thinking about task accomplishment, not who. So I found the better first question, which is who has done something worth recognizing since we last met? By adding that question before what went well and what needs improvement, I saw something really cool happen in that what needs improvement question. If I shower you with praise 4 minutes ago, and then I say, I need to work with Rebecca to improve some process, now you know it's coming from a place of care. I'm not coming from a place of judgment or critique. So very quickly, I have the team, working through those on a daily basis through daily meetings. And then there's a second part of this that I would say is really valuable one-on-one. And it's going to come through asking some basic questions. But really what I'm trying to figure out is, what does somebody expect to happen? What happened? And what did they learn? And if I can just build those in, then I just say everyday conversational flow, it works beautifully. And then when we have, I would say, larger projects that occur at, most organizations, it's two things. One is called a pre-mortem, and most people know the opposite, the post-mortem. So before something and then after something. And what I found really successful is that pre-mortem. We have a bunch of experience. This team may or may not have worked together. Let's talk about how this project could fail so we can plan against that. And then once we do all the work, we get to the end and we say, we plan to do X. How well did we do? And through those reflections, for me, that's where learning happens. And it's either inviting new perspectives that I just didn't consider because that's not the way I view the world, or in looking at it and just saying, what must be true the next time we work together? Because maybe we just saw a process flow issue. Maybe we were unclear on the goals, priorities, et cetera. And whatever those things may be, become the things that lead into the pre-mortem for the next project. To really say one of those three things or the combination of those three is really where I put a lot of emphasis on everyday discussions, one-on-ones with people, and those large group projects where there's just so much moving that not any single person in a large project can keep up with by themselves.
If there was like a one really small action a leader could take to start having this type of reflective work or implementing this reflective work with their teams, is it something that you just implement in your one-on-ones or your weekly huddles? Or what would be like a quick takeaway that a leader listening right now could easily implement?
Three questions. What do you expect to happen when you take this step? What actually happened? And what did you learn? And that's every discussion forever and ever. Because if I don't get prompted that question, it's like, well, I don't actually know. So the difference in these questions is what did you expect to happen is best to do before you take the action. And then those other two questions come after the action's been taken. So in that way, I'm really trying to say, like, without guiding the witness, without stating, like, I want to be good, I want to be viewed as I knew it was going to happen, so I just tell you that. So I just say, okay, just guess right now based on your evidence. What do you think is going to happen? I use the word hypothesize in my language, but ultimately it's like you have good information. What do you think is going to happen? And in that is where I would say, learning happens for each of us. So that's that way to go to the concept of thinking about thinking or metacognition, just saying I need to build in as many of those moments as possible because that person, you, me, individually, we all need to build out knowledge ourselves. Doesn't matter how much you tell me. And I think it comes to those three questions.
That's super simple, super easy to implement, and it comes from a place of curiosity, and it really helps you with that problem solving and learning cycle. I'd love to get into our final exercise for the day. For those of you who did not listen to the previous episode with John Colby, where I introduced the concept of passing the empathy torch, this is something new that we're doing with our podcast this year because I realized that I interview people all the time, and I can connect the dots between your areas of expertise and your passions, and I see the dotted lines, and I often make those connections when I see obvious connections that need to be made. But otherwise, you're all just kind of in your own silos on each of my episodes. And so I really wanted to create more cohesion and connection between guests because all of you collectively are incredible and should get to know each other better. Fortunately, the previous guest you know well, John Colby, he was the MC at the Association for Manufacturing Excellence event back in October last year. I know you're chairing the event in Milwaukee later this year. So it makes it a little easier since you guys are my guinea pigs and you're just testing out this concept with me. But John's challenge was he kind of gave you two possibilities to think about. One was imagine someone, a colleague or a friend or a family member who might be experiencing financial difficulty, for example. And he said, for example, over the weekend, you could literally put yourself in their shoes and not go out to dinner at a restaurant, not order takeout. If you have kids, how are you going to entertain them without paying for something, tickets to the museum or whatever? So literally try to imagine what it's like to be in someone's shoes who's trying to save money. The other alternative that he provided as an empathy challenge was just simply trying to uh, empathize with someone by, let's say that there's a friend who's being micromanaged by their boss at work. Try to sit in their shoes and start asking questions. And then I feel like this is something that you do already so well in the workplace based on the conversation we just had, but come from a place of curiosity and dig deeper into the situation that they're experiencing. ask as many questions as you can. His comment was, if you don't have any questions, then you're not empathizing. You haven't dug deeply enough. So I'd love to know, first of all, how do you plan to respond, or have you already responded to John's challenge? And then, of course, the next step would be for you to present an empathy challenge for the next guest.
No, I love it, and I appreciate the comments around the connections between guests. And for me, empathy goes back to this idea that how you view it matters. For 35 plus years, I thought empathy was something you're born with. And one day I had an awesome mentor challenge that idea. And I realized, like, no, this is a skill. So then it became a conversation of how do I practice empathy deliberately? How do I go out and, I would say mirror what I would say the good behaviors in others? And I think John's point is well received. There's one that my wife had taught me years ago, which is around the same concept John mentioned, which is, if you think about people not having food to eat, why don't you just fast for a day? And then you can really empathize what it means to be in that situation much better than the alternative where you go, I can think about it, but I don't really get to experience the same thing. And I really appreciated John's comment around financials because that's one that I think far too often people think there aren't these people living below in the poverty line. So I think that's the one that really stood out for me. So that's one of those that I want to just go practice and just say, for a week, don't spend any money on the luxuries. Like, what does that actually feel like versus just thinking about it? So my Amazon driver is going to be happy they don't have to come to my house for the next month or next week whenever I do this experiment. But I think that one will really help ground me to say, just, how am I processing this? How am I feeling when I don't have those options? And then go back to empathy as a skill I've been working on for many years now. And every once in a while, I'll have somebody that just drops some knowledge in my head and I go, oh, that is perfect. And that's really where I want to share my empathy challenge with you, Rebecca, and anybody listening, which is each of us have a tendency to do one of three things really, really well in my mind. I tend to help people. So even without asking, I want to solve their problem. I naturally go to that. Then my wife, if you ask her, she is the most amazing listener. And if somebody doesn't ask my wife directly for help, she's going to listen. She's going to give that person vet and demonstrate that really, really well. And then you're going to find this third person that's just really your emotional sponge that can take all of your negative and your positive, absorb it with you, and experience life. And it came on this idea of asking something very simple to yourself and perhaps to the other person. Do you need helped? Do you need heard? Or do you need hugged? And that really breaks down the assumption that we each have taking into the conversation. And I know since I've started practicing that, I realized very quickly I was trying to go to help before anybody wanted help. And it was the expectation, but I was like, oh, this is beautiful. Like, this person doesn't actually want me to solve anything. I just need to be here for them in the moment. I remember the friend's husband in this story, who I'm really good friends with. He says one day after I'm having a really stressful moment, he's like, which one of those three do you need? And I was like, I just need like 14 hugs, Lou. So at this point, that really showed up well for me, because it wasn't him going into let me watch and like, let me help you solve this problem. Do you want to vent? It's like, no, I don't want any of that. I just need 30 seconds to think about it. So I think as people go forward from today, consider that in the next conversation, that initial bias to say, I want to do X. Just pause and figure out what does that person actually need. And I think it lends well to what John shared about not asking enough questions, because that to me really sets me up for success. And I imagine we'll build more empathy in the world simply because you're asking for what the other person wants or needs in the moment, not assuming what would be best if I had the roles reversed.
I love that too. And just like the advice you were giving to leaders in the workplace, it's super simple. Do you want to be helped, heard, or hugged? I mean, and three H's, so it's easy to remember. And that's great. I'm married to an engineer, so I completely understand where you're coming from. He also moves straight into problem solving anytime I come to him. And sometimes women just want to be heard or hugged. So yeah, I think that's a very legitimate way to approach things. And we don't often take the time to pause and think about what the other person needs in the moment. So thank you for sharing that. And I look forward to seeing how the next guest approaches that challenge. So the idea is that, as we start to continue to pass the empathy torch, 4, 5, 6 times, I'll start to circle back with all of you, connect you and share responses. I want to know how it was when you just stopped buying those luxuries and the Amazon truck stop going past your house for a couple of weeks. Love to see what that experience was like and circle back with you on that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me today, Rebecca. I really appreciate the time to connect with you. And there are a few people that I would say just do some really amazing work where they're out promoting love, kindness, and other. And I can add you to that list of really amazing people trying to make the world a better place through empathy, through improved connection. So thank you for all you do to make this work for everyone.
Thank you, William, and welcome to the Empathy Collective. You are part of this collective of people who all believe in the same thing. So thank you for being a part of the community. Take care. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And if you would like to learn more about the Empathy Collective and join the waitlist for the community we are building, sign up on our website, theempathycollective.com. Life is too short. Let's take care of each other at work so that together we can make this world a better place.